You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 192. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Are you a lawyer who is thinking about or who has decided that it is time for you to apply for a new job at a different law firm? If so, you are 100% in the right place, and I am thrilled to have you here. Welcome. If you are returning to the podcast, welcome back. It is a pleasure to have you with me here this week. If you're brand new to the podcast, welcome. I would love to introduce myself. My name is Paula Price. I am a lawyer turned certified executive coach. I work exclusively with lawyers to help them thrive in practice, whether that means finding the job that is right for you or succeeding in that job, whether that be through improved practice management, improved time management, developing your confidence, your leadership skills. It could also be supporting you in a different type of practice, right? You may not practice in a law firm environment, but you're in-house or you run your own practice or you're thinking about doing those things. And so I am just thrilled to have you here and very excited to dive into the topic of transitioning. Now, taking a step back, this is going to be the first installment of a 3-part series of podcast episodes where we are basically doing a masterclass on job transitions. I have decided to approach this question from that perspective because there is a process that is fairly routine when you decide to change jobs. And for me, it's something that I have taken a number of clients through over the past 7 years that I have been coaching lawyers. So I see this, we go through the same process. There are, some variations from client to client, lawyer to lawyer. However, for you, this might be the first time that you're looking for a job. It may be that you have done this before, but you weren't super happy with the results that you got. And so I thought to myself, it would be really, really useful to have a resource where I break down all the steps. And so I've done that, and I've divided those steps into 3 separate phases. So today is the first installment. And so what we will be talking about today is the work that I recommend that you do if you have decided or are deciding that you would like to take on a new job, a new role in a law firm, what you need to do to prepare yourself for the transition. The second installment of the series is going to be all about the mechanics of getting that new job, right? So I've decided that that is a separate phase. So today is the pre-work. When you tune in again to the next episode, we'll be talking about that process of securing your new job. And then the third installment in this series is going to be how to succeed in your new role. So once you have gone through the process, you've found a new job, you're about to start working, we want to make sure that you set yourself up for success. So that will be the third installment. Now you can also expect that there will be a bonus call. I have reached out to someone who I think will be a wonderful guest to interview who can help add a different perspective to this as well. So stay tuned for that. That would be kind of like the 4th episode in this series. So I'm thrilled to have you here, thrilled to answer your questions and take you through the process, what you need to do in order to transition from job A to job B. Now, I'm going to be talking to you as though you are in a law firm and you want to go to another law firm. Now, if you are not currently at a law firm for whatever reason, maybe you are not employed, maybe you are a student and you're looking for a job, maybe you're in some other organization and you want to get into a law firm, what we talk about today is still relevant to you. I just want you to apply your filter to really tease out what relates most to you, and maybe there are some things that we talk about that don't relate to you. Now, if you are going to a law firm, that's great. You might find that this is very relevant. But if you're going into another role, for example, if you don't want a job at a law firm, you want to go in-house, or you want to start your own firm, or you want to go into government or some other option, again, I would invite you to listen to this episode through the lens of how this relates to you specifically, and to apply it and to think about it and to make modifications as would best suit your specific situation. So that is my preamble to today's episode. And if you have questions as we go through the episodes, but by all means, is that what it is? Please do feel free to reach out to me to discuss. If you would like additional support, if you would like my help to help you transition from your current job to a new job, please do reach out to me. This is a huge part of the work that I do with lawyers. I would be more than happy to help and support you through this process. It is not something that you need to do alone. So with that, let's dive into part 1 of this 3-part series, which is preparing to get a new job at a law firm. So today I'm going to be sharing with you the 3 steps that I think are really valuable to setting yourself up for success in a job transition. So I'll tell you what those steps are, and then we'll go into each of them in more detail. So the first is to make a decision. The second is to set your GPS. And the third is to mind your mindset. So I'll let you know what I mean by each of these categories as we go through the episode. So starting at the beginning, making a decision. So if you've tuned in and you already know that you want to make a job transition, that is really great news, because the decision part is actually one of the hardest parts when it comes to transitioning from job A to job B. So if you already know that you want to move on, great. You might still listen to this part of the episode. It might be interesting to you. It might help you reinforce that you are making the right decision. It might raise some questions for you as well. But if you've made that decision, then you're already in a really good place to get started. Now, it may be that you have decided to look for a new job, but the decision did not originate with you, right? By this, what I'm talking about is you have been let go from your law firm. So you may be an associate, you've been working within a firm for a while, and there's been a change, and for whatever reason, they have let you go. Maybe the economy is not very strong. Maybe there's not as much demand in your practice area. Maybe the job was not a good fit. There could be many reasons. And if that is something that you are going through right now, I just wanted to say that you are not alone, that this happens more often than I think people really realize. And that if you are being let go from firm A and you want to move on to another firm, you are well positioned to do so. This happens, again, as I said, more often than you think, and you will land on your feet. I've experienced numbers of lawyers who have had this transition where they've been let go from one firm and they move on to another firm or another organization and go on to have really successful careers. So if this is the situation that you find yourself in, don't worry. You can absolutely find another job, a great job, perhaps a job that is even better than the one that you are leaving. And so rest assured, this process applies to you. And I expect, hope that you will find this to be a really valuable episode to tune into. Now, it could also be that the reason that you're looking is because you were an articling student. This happens quite a bit in Canada, where you're an articling student, you go through the recruitment process, you start your legal career at a law firm, and at the end of articles, there's simply not capacity to take you on as an associate. And so this is also relevant to you. You might find that, you would have liked to stay at your firm where you articled, and unfortunately, it wasn't in the cards. So this is a really great opportunity for you to find a new firm, to find a new role where you feel really aligned, where you feel like it's a good fit, and where you've done a conscious and conscientious process to decide where you want to go next. So if you're in this category, whether you're an associate who has been let go, if you are an articling student who is not being hired back, not to worry, this process does apply to you. what I would add to the process is number one, that you may wish to have a little bit of extra work in rebuilding your confidence. So if what you've experienced over the past few months has had the effect of kind of dampening your feelings of self-confidence, maybe you're questioning whether or not this career is the right career for you, then you are not alone and you can absolutely have additional support for that. I would be happy to support you. I know there are other coaches who can support you, counselors who can support you. I would certainly consider whether that's a part of the process that you would like to integrate. I won't really be talking about that in today's podcast episode, but certainly it is something to factor in. The other thing is that there may be an additional sense of urgency. So if you have decided to move on from job A to job B and it's your decision and there is no particular timeline in place, then your approach to your job search might feel a little bit less urgent than if you're in a position where you've been given notice, you have a certain number of weeks or months to secure a new position. And so there may be a different dynamic to the work that you do to create your new job. So going back to this first category, making a decision, if you have already made a decision or that decision has been made for you, then you're ready to move on, right? You're ready to follow the steps that are required to get a new job. Now, you may be on the fence. And if you are on the fence, you are like many of the lawyers who reach out to me who are thinking about making a transition, but aren't really sure about their next move. So there may be a number of reasons why you have a job where you're thinking about leaving, but you haven't really decided whether to move forward. So maybe you're waiting for things to improve. This is really common. You aren't all that happy, but you're not unhappy either. You think that there's potential for your role to get better. There might be a shift in terms of the makeup of your immediate group, right? Maybe somebody's retiring and moving on. Maybe you're in a firm where there are multiple different practice areas and you could theoretically move from the practice area that you're in into a different practice area. Maybe you're in the middle of a really awful case, right? Maybe you're in one of those cases where everything seems to be going wrong and you're kind of feeling down about it and you're questioning things, but you know that that's going to improve over time or you think it's going to improve over time. So there are lots of situations where you might be waiting for things to improve, but you're starting to think that maybe it's time to move to a different firm. You might be waiting for the perfect time. Now, this one is tricky, right? Again, you might be in a file where the biggest case that you're working on is about to go to trial. That's going to happen in a few weeks' time. The trial is going to last for a few months, and you're an essential player, right? If you were to leave, it would really upend things for your firm, for your client, and you don't want to do that. And so you've committed to yourself that you're going to finish the trial, and then you'll start to look. Or maybe you're just really busy. You've got multiple files on the go. You think that maybe in a few months' time, it's going to get a little bit less busy. You'll have more bandwidth, so you can start looking for a job. Maybe you are waiting for bonuses to be paid out, right? This is relatively common around the time of year that I'm recording this, right? This episode will go live, I think, sort of mid to late January. And that's usually getting close to the time that bonuses are paid out, right? You had your last year of billings, and so you'll know whether or not you're entitled to a bonus. And so that might be another factor. You're waiting for that. Now, it's one thing to be waiting if you're on the cusp of receiving your bonus. If you're several months out, maybe it's not that immediate. So again, this is just thinking about waiting for that perfect time. Will there ever be a perfect time? That is questionable. Now, other reasons why you might be staying in a job where you're not all that happy is fear, right? The fear of leaving the firm that you know with the quirks and the warts that you know. And all firms, all places of employment have quirks and have warts. I can say this with reasonable confidence because I have worked at a number of firms. I speak with lawyers from a number of firms. I run my own practice, right? And I think that there are incredible, amazing places where you can work, and none of them is going to be perfect, right? There's always going to be something that is a little bit tricky or that you don't love, and that is simply part of the package. I have yet to meet somebody who has zero, I don't want to call them issues because I don't love that word, but zero issues with their workplace, work environment, etc. Yes. So if you are in a role, for example, where it's not perfect and you're thinking, well, at least it's the devil that I know versus the devil that I don't know, you might stay for too long, right? Because there's a difference between the job that is not perfect, which is really, as I described before, very few jobs, or if any, are actually perfect. But are the things that are bothering you really important to you, right? Because there is a distinction there. So there's that comfort of staying where you are versus the fear of the unknown. And that can keep a lot of people stuck in place. You might think that you need to hate your job to leave it, right? You might think that if you like it well enough, if it, reaches a certain threshold and it's okay, that you should stay, right? And I'm here to tell you, you don't need to hate your job to leave it. Now, this isn't to say that you should just switch jobs because you feel like it, although you could. But the standard doesn't have to be quite at the hate level, right? We're thinking about you and your career and making strategic career moves that will set you up to achieve your long-term goals. And so the standard for leaving will be different for everybody. And it doesn't have to be that you're so miserable that you can't take it another day. And I would suggest that you not wait for that to be the case before you move if you already know that that's what you want. Now, what I can say is, having observed a number of people in this situation where they're kind of unhappy, but they're sticking it out, is that things don't typically and generally get better over time. Now, an analogy that might resonate with you is when you go to record your billable hours, right? If you are a lawyer who records their time, and we're talking about going from firm A to firm B, so chances are you are recording your time in perhaps 6-minute increments. And you know that if you put off the task, right? If you wait till the end of the day, it gets a little bit harder than if you're doing it contemporaneously. Still not impossible, but a little bit harder. If you wait till the end of the week, it becomes materially harder, right? You're needing to go back in time. You're trying to remember tasks that you were working on. If you don't write down the amount of time, you're trying to guesstimate how much time you spent on things. You might be under recording. You might be over recording. There are a number of challenges that come. If you wait till the end of the month, then you're in even a worse case, right? You're really anxious about doing your time. You now have to reconstruct multiple days of time. It is taking longer to do your time because you're trying to go through all your emails and your records to see what it is. And you get what I'm trying to say here, right? And staying in a job for too long can have some of the negative consequences or additional negative consequences versus more proactively looking for a new role. So what can that look like? Well, you might find that you start to disengage, right? If you're in a role and you're unhappy, you might be less proactive about getting new work, getting work that you like, being a really good team player, contributing to the files. The relationships you have may start to sour, right? Instead of building relationships and feeling strong and connected and part of a team, you might be kind of distancing yourself. You might feel like people are distancing themselves from you. That might lead to relationships feeling awkward. It can even lead to relationships being soured. Sometimes even it can lead to the faucet of your workflow drying up, right? You might find that there's fewer lawyers that are available for you to work with. So that can happen over time. You might find that the work that you're doing really doesn't align with your long-term objectives. So for example, if you're a litigator and what you really want to do is solicitor's work and you keep down that path of litigating, then you're moving away from your goal of solicitor's work as long as you stay where you are. And what this can overall contribute to as well is a lack or a reduction of confidence. So I mentioned earlier, if you are let go from a firm, if you're not hired back at a firm, that can result in a blow to your confidence, right? You might feel like your sense of self-confidence, your confidence in your ability to do your job, that can take a toll, right, on your sense of self and whether this is the right role for you, etc. And the same can be true if you find yourself in a job where you're not a really good match, right? You start to feel less confident about your work. That might be reflected back to you because the lawyers that you're working with, the clients that you're working with, maybe they don't feel inspired either. And so just notice, right, that the long-term effect of this may be that your confidence diminishes. Now, if this is you, if you can relate to this, I will tell you right now that you can 100% turn this around. I've seen it happen many, many times, that sometimes the environment that you're in just isn't conducive to you practicing at your fullest level of confidence. And sometimes a change of firm, a change of organization, sometimes even a change of practice area in the same firm can have a material effect on your confidence improving. So these are some of the drawbacks that may arise if you are staying in a job for longer than you really need to be. Now, a couple of other sort of issues that might come up is you might find you're complaining a lot. You might find that you're really unhappy, right? So your personal satisfaction of your professional work can suffer, as can your personal life, right? If you find that you're complaining often to your friends, your family, your loved ones, your partner, etc., that might feel really kind of heavy, right? In terms of your personal life. You might also find that you have fewer options. Now, I don't know if I fully buy into this, but there are areas or time periods that are considered to be pretty peak in terms of being able to move. I mean, some people say that 3 to 5 year mark is a really great time for lawyers to transition from one firm to another, that if you wait too long, it becomes harder to find a role because you're more expensive and you may not have the book of business, etc. So, I mean, it's possible that maybe you have fewer options. I wouldn't sell yourself on that idea and believe that you don't have options. I think you'll always have options. However, you may find that some of the options that you may have had are no longer available if you wait too long. So these are some reasons why you may not want to stay in a role if you are really doubting it and you know that you want to move on. Now, if you are stuck, then you are not alone. As I mentioned earlier, have worked with a number of lawyers who feel stuck, and I have also recorded a number of podcast episodes about lawyers who feel stuck, and I tallied those this morning. It turns out there are 14 of them. Yes, 14 out of a series of 192 episodes so far. So I will put links to all of those episodes in the show notes that go along with this episode. And because 14 might seem like a high number, now you can go through them, look at the titles and see what resonates with you. But to give you a bit of a leg up here, I thought I'd narrow it down to 3 episodes that you might find helpful. The first is episode 106, 5 Signs You're Stuck and What to Do About It. Episode 111, Quiz, Is It Time to Leave Your Job? And episode 178, Breaking the Stuck Lawyer Cycle, Exploring Root Causes and Steps to Move On. So again, there will be links to these episodes in the show notes. And so you can go and listen to those, and those may help you figure out how to deal with your stuckness. Now, I will mention as well that I'll be mentioning a number of different podcast episodes throughout the episode, and all of them will be linked to in the show notes. So then the last category, right? We've talked about you've decided to go. We've talked about someone else has decided that it's time for you to go. We have talked about you being on the fence. You're in that gray zone. You're not quite decided, but you're thinking about it. And then finally, you may decide to stay in your job even though you're not happy. And I mention this category because you might be listening to this episode because you're curious. What would it take for me to go from where I am to another job? And so I'm glad you're here. Listen to the steps. Listen to the whole podcast series all the way through because this might help you. Now, if ultimately you decide that you want to stay where you are, then my advice to you is to do the absolute best job that you can in the role that you're in. Not only will that increase the chances that you'll start to like your job again or even love your job, it is possible. It will also set you up for greater success if and when you do decide to make a transition. And there are a couple of episodes that I have recorded on this very topic. Episode 121, When You Want to Leave But Choose to Stay, and episode 174, How to Thrive at Work While Exploring Other Options. So this concludes the first section of today's podcast episode, which is really to make a decision. And once you have made a decision, once you know that it is time to move on, that's when I move over to step 2, which is setting your GPS. Now, it just occurred to me that for lawyers who are on the fence, it would still be really beneficial for you to follow through with these next categories because, especially the setting your GPS, the work that we're going to do here is really that deep dive into you. It's that self-assessment work that will help you clarify if what you're looking for is even possible where you are right now. So this would be a really great exercise, even if you still haven't fully decided that you want to move on. And if you have decided, then you are 100% in the right place. So I've got a number of steps here. And the best way to do this is probably to listen to the episode. And then if you really want to go deep, listen to the episode again and do it with a notepad handy and pause the episode after each of the questions. So you can do that. It might feel like more than you want to do. Again, if you want help with this, reach out to me. I can take you through this. It's what I often do with clients who are transitioning, and I would love to help you through it. Sometimes it can really help to have somebody else there to ask you questions, to help probe into different areas, to support you. So setting your GPS is really about you getting to know you. What I have noticed is that sometimes if you have decided that it's time to get a new job, your first instinct will be to go out and find that job, right? Go to the job board, see what's listed, what's available, throw your CV together, write a cover letter that seems to do the trick, send out your materials, and Bob's your uncle, right? You've started the process. And what I would offer to you is that you're missing this key step. Before you do any of that, it's so important for you to actually get to know yourself better and to know what you want better. And you may already know this at somewhat of an intuitive level. This process will help you get really clear about what you want going forward. So the first place that I like to start with my clients is to have you do a values assessment, right? If you've done this before, you will be reassessing your values. If this is the first time you've done it, it will probably be a pretty eye-opening experience for you to finally take inventory of what matters to you most. Now, if you are a lawyer who went through the law firm recruitment process and you've been in the same job for a while, then you might feel like you've never really done this, right? You kind of went from school to a law firm without ever doing this deep work of reflecting on what really matters to you. And so it's really great that you have this opportunity to now dive deep. And what I'd invite you to consider is that when you applied for the job that you're in now, and this applies whether you went through the law firm recruitment process or whether you're on your second or your third even role within a law firm or other organization, is that when you stepped into your current job, you didn't have the same information that you have now because you hadn't done the work that you have done since then. So you're at a different vantage point. Your values will shift over time. I know that mine have certainly shifted, both in terms of my professional values and also my personal values. And it's not to say that there aren't certain core values that have remained the same. There certainly are, but there are also changes. And so I would encourage you to check in with yourself, regardless of whether you're transitioning, just on what your values are and to make sure that you're really clear on what they are. Now, another question that you want to ask yourself is, what are your long-term goals? Now, for some of you, your goal will be to work at a law firm, to stay at a law firm, to become a partner at a law firm, and that's what you want to do. You may want to be in a law firm, but you don't necessarily want to be a partner, right? You might want to take on a counsel role. You might want to stay in a law firm, but stop practicing law, right? You might want to become the director of professional development. You might want to join the marketing team. You might want to take on more of a role in project management. So there are lots of different opportunities that are available to you within a law firm environment. You may also think, you know what, this billable hour thing, it just isn't for me, nor do I really see myself in a law firm long term. And so you might have your heart set on going in-house one day, right? So the jobs that you're looking at ideally would be ones that would equip you with the skills that you will need to be an effective in-house counsel. Now, you might also think government is your long-term plan. Maybe you want to open your own firm one day, or maybe law is okay. You're in it for now because, but ultimately you're not happy with law. And so you see yourself doing something else in the future. So ask yourself what your long-term goals are, because that's going to inform the type of job that you're going to go to next. And if you would like some ideas about what options are available to you as a trained lawyer, I would encourage you to listen to episode 94, which is called Career Options for Lawyers. And it is effectively a laundry list of all the different jobs that I was able to think of at the time of recording that episode. And so that might give you some ideas about what you might want to do with your law degree. Now, moving on to the next step then. So in terms of setting your GPS, we want to get clear on your values. We want to assess your long-term goals. Step 3, or the next item, is what have you learned about yourself from your work experience about the work that you like to do? Again, this is a step that lawyers often skip, right? We're so used to doing the things that people want us to do. We don't often or always take the time to ask ourselves what it is that we really, truly love. So a couple of ways to approach this question is, what is the type of work that you like to do? Now, you might like the adversarial nature of litigation, or you might not like the adversarial nature of litigation, right? You might have a particular industry that you really like to work in, right? Whether that's construction, or maybe it's fintech, or maybe it's IP, or maybe it's labor and employment. I mean, there might be an industry or a practice area that you are really, really keen on, and you know that you want to do more of that work. Maybe it's offered where you are, maybe not, and that's one of the reasons that you want to leave. Now, you might ask yourself, do you like people-focused work, or are you more corporate? And I raise this example. This is something that I experienced when I was a practitioner. I found I was in a role at one point where the work was really more people-oriented, right? There was a personal injury component to it where I was dealing with a lot of emotions and people's physical problems, medical problems, and that did not work for me. I did not enjoy that work environment. What I really wanted was to do more of the corporate type work. And so that was a pretty strong signal for me, and it really helped me figure out what my next step was going to be. So in that case, I went from insurance defense litigation into commercial litigation, and that was a better fit for me in terms of the substantive nature of the work that I was doing. So for you, you might think about the work that you do. Are there areas in your practice where you really, really love that work? You would like to do more of it. And are there areas where you don't, right? It just doesn't sit very well with you. Now, do you like short fuse projects or longer term projects, right? Or a mix of both, right? You might really like the cadence of regular trips to court, some files that come in and they're out in just a few days. Some practices are like that, right? If you're thinking about, I think immigration is like that, where you'll have these discrete tasks where you do it, versus commercial litigation, where you might have a file that goes on for 2 years, maybe, or longer even. It might be punctuated by court applications and hearings and so forth. But you want to ask yourself what cadence works for you, right? If you have a practice that's really balanced, maybe it's a solicitor's practice, maybe you're drafting wills and there tends not to be a lot of urgency. Maybe that works really well with your personality style, but maybe you like something that's more high pressure, higher, quicker turnaround. So again, you're going to want to notice what type of work, like what cadence actually works for you, and then do more of that. Now, you also want to think about your environment. Do you like working at a big firm, or do you like working at a small firm? Do you like working in teams, or do you like working solo? Do you want more mentorship, right? This is something I hear from a lot of lawyers at all levels. They want someone who can be a mentor to them within the organization. Do you like an environment that's more entrepreneurial? Are you being rewarded for things that you do, clients that you bring in, the hours that you're working, versus maybe something that's a little bit more structured or a little bit more established where there's less of an opportunity for you to do that? So these are all questions that you want to ask yourself. What is the ideal work environment for you? Now, the next question that you might ask yourself is, what are your natural strengths and weaknesses? So even before ever becoming a lawyer, you had a number, and you continue to have a number of innate strengths and innate weaknesses. We all do. So, for example, in a law environment, you might be really good at research. You might be the person who can find the case that solves the problem, that answers the question. You might be really good at details. You might be really good at drafting, or you might be really good at action taking, right? You might be one of those people who is really good at getting on their feet, thinking on the spot, dealing with crises really efficiently. And so what are your innate skills? Again, going back to that people question, you might be really good with people. You might thrive in an environment where you're helping people who are in distress, right? I'm thinking of family law lawyers or criminal law lawyers or estate litigation lawyers, where you're really good. You're almost drawn to those people who are really struggling emotionally, and you are there for them. Or you might be more interested in the focused. You might be more interested in the more corporate environment or a more academic environment. And by academic, I just mean less in relation to people who have problems where they are quite emotional relative to fact patterns where it's a bit more technical, right? There are fewer feelings involved. Now, you might also think about how you practice. Like, again, going back to that question of cadence, do you thrive with ebbs and flows, or do you prefer a more steady state? Like, what works better for you, right? Some people thrive under pressure. Other people do not thrive under pressure. And so you want to know that when you're thinking about the environment that you're going to put yourself in. Now, what are your preferences? So here you might find that you are a litigator, but you don't actually like to litigate. Now, this is something that I can relate to. I was a litigator for years, and I found there were certain aspects of litigation that I absolutely loved. I loved the problem solving. I loved the research. I loved the drafting. I loved the structure. I loved learning about all these really interesting details about people's lives and about their problems and about the businesses, etc. What I didn't love was the adversarial nature of the litigation that I was involved in as a lawyer. And so for you, you might think about, okay, what are the preferences that you have when it comes to your practice? Now, it also might be preferences in terms of working structure. So I work with a number of lawyers who have ADHD in my practice and others who may or may not have ADHD, but they have challenges with practice management, right? And a lot of this can be tied back to executive function. I've got a whole series of episodes about executive function. If you're interested in that, you can look those up. We'll also put those in the show notes. But if you do struggle with practice management, ADHD, you might think about the structure of the firm that you're in. Are there the right supports for you? Is there the mentorship that you need? Is the structure of the work such that you feel engaged? So for example, you might find that you thrive in an environment where there are ebbs and flows, right? You might get really engaged when the pressure is on. And so you might want a certain level of that, but you might also want a bit of a flow time, right? You don't want that to be your career 100% of the time. That would be exhausting. So think about what your preferences are, right? Both in terms of substance and also in terms of style and where you can really build on your strengths, right? Where you're going to be supported, where your practice style is going to align with the needs of the firm. You might be a new parent, right? This happened to me as well. I had one child and then a second child, and that absolutely impacted my ability to spend time at the office, right? You may experience the same thing. You have children, all of a sudden you've got very clear boundaries on your time. You've got to be there in the morning to look after your children, to take them to daycare, get them ready for the nanny, whatever your childcare situation looks like. And so your ability to go to work early because you need to, I used to do that all the time. As a litigator, I would go to the office really early in the morning on days that I had court. That wasn't as easy to do once I had children at home. Also at the end of the day, right? If you have daycare pickup or you're going home because the nanny is going to leave, then maybe you can't stay late on a regular basis to complete your work. And so having children can have a really big impact on your ability to show up at an office. Now, things have changed since I was in practice because I was practicing before the pandemic. Working from home wasn't really a thing the way that it is now. So you can probably find more flexibility in a law firm environment that would be more compatible with the needs that you have for looking after your children. But again, this is something you might want to think of. So if you're at a firm right now where the billable hour expectation does not align with what you can reasonably provide, given what you want to do as a parent, then it may be that you need to look at different options, different firms that have different structures, different billing targets, etc., that might be more compatible with what it is that you would like to have for your practice. Finally, in terms of preferences, I'd also offer culture. I mean, there are some firms that will align very well with your cultural leanings. And what I mean by that in terms of cultural leanings is that degree of mentorship, entrepreneurship. What is the feel of the office like? What are the people like? And so you might find that there are environments where you feel like you really belong, and there may be environments where you just don't feel that much aligned with your peers. So you'll want to think about that too. And I'll just offer here, I know for myself, when I had children, that did shift my working culture, right? If I can give myself a culture, I don't know if that really works very well. But I found that previously I'd been a lot more able to be an all hands on deck kind of person. And that was very aligned with the culture that I was in. It was a culture that I loved. I really, really did. But it was harder for me to do that, right, after having kids. And so I found that I felt less part of the culture, and it wasn't anything to do with anybody in the organization. I mean, the organization, is what it is. And, there's reasons for that and there's benefits to that. And, you might also find that a culture that works really well for you at one stage of your life that you really love just doesn't work at a different stage of your life. And it's not that there's anything wrong with you or wrong with the organization. It's just that the cultural fit no longer really aligns. So these are just things that you might think about. Now, another factor, your skills and what sets you apart. So don't forget to ask yourself what makes you distinct, right? What is your zone of genius? What do you do better than anybody else? And this can be a hard question to ask yourself. You might feel like you should be humble and not brag, and let's just let that go for now. Right now, what we really want to do is focus on really what is exceptional and unique about you. That will come in really handy, especially during the interview phase when you're trying to distinguish yourself from other candidates. And frankly, even apart from interviews, it's just nice to know about yourself. What are you really good at? What is your zone of genius? Other questions you might ask yourself, what do you want more of? So again, just thinking about the work that you're doing currently, work that you've done in past roles. What would you like to build more of? Sometimes it might be work that you haven't done, but you think you want to do. That's great. Put that on the list. What are you currently doing that you need to stop doing? Now, this is where you might be fairly, I don't know what the right word is here, but you want to be honest with yourself. I think sometimes we like to look at our situation and think, it's somebody else's fault, right? It's the structure of the organization, the billable targets are too high, the clients are unreasonable, etc. And here, what I would ask you to think about is what your role is in any of the, I'll call them grievances. Maybe that's too strong of a word, but in any of the situations that you find yourself in that you don't like, I will ask you to give yourself an honest assessment of your role. Now, this doesn't mean blaming yourself or throwing yourself under the bus or beating yourself up. Not at all. However, there may be things that you are doing currently that are contributing to a situation that you do not like. And so we want to make sure that you know what those things are, because you're going to be given a fresh start in a new job. And so we would love to set you up for success by knowing what you may be doing currently that isn't really working for you. And chances are it may not be working for your organization. So what I would invite you to think about here is boundaries. That is one that I see quite often where a lawyer feels like they are just simply working too hard. They can't keep up. They feel undervalued, whatever that happens to look like for you. And it often comes from a question about boundaries, right? Are you setting appropriate boundaries? Are you communicating appropriate boundaries? Are you having good boundaries with yourself, right? How are you speaking to yourself, treating yourself? Are you engaging in enough self-care? And so what do your boundaries look like? It may be that you have adopted a really reactive way of practicing. So what I invite everybody to do, and what I strongly encourage all lawyers to do, especially the ones that I work with, is if you feel like your practice is reactive, I want to help you find ways to be more proactive, right? An analogy that comes to mind for me, maybe you can relate, is when you're driving. And if you've ever noticed where, if you know where you're going in your car, you can be fairly assertive in the way that you drive, right? You almost feel like you can go a little bit faster, you're more confident, you know the route, etc. Versus when you're driving and you don't know where you're going, right? If you're in a territory that you've never been in before, right? This happens to me if I'm driving in a part of town that I don't know very well. I don't know when the next traffic light is going to show up. I don't know my destination. I feel more ill at ease in the car. It's more reactive. I'm a little bit more nervous. And so it can be the same thing in your practice. If you go into your practice and you are decisive, you know where you want to go, or at least you think you know where you want to go, and you've got a roadmap for yourself, then you're going to approach your practice with a lot more confidence and clarity than if you're in that reactive zone where you're just kind of letting other people call the shots, where you don't really know where you want to go. You're kind of going with the flow, so to speak. And so if that's something that you're doing in your current role, then I would encourage you to think about how you can bring a more proactive approach to your next role. And another thing that might be helpful here is there's an expression, wherever you go, there you are. I think it's Rumi that might have said that. I apologize if I have the person wrong. However, that's the truth. Wherever you go, there you are. So you can take yourself and you can go from job A to job B. And if there are habits you have currently that are creating an unpleasant work environment for yourself, and you bring those habits with you, then chances are you can end up creating a similar situation somewhere else. So we just want to be aware of them. We don't want to beat ourselves up over it. We don't want to be super critical. We just want to be aware so that we can think about how we're going to approach our new job differently in order to have greater success. And then finally, what I'd invite you to do here is to describe your perfect job. So there is science behind this. When you describe your perfect job, right? When you go into the details of what it is that you would love to create, what you're doing is you're signaling to your brain to start looking for these things. It activates the reticular activation system. So there is some science there. You can look it up. I'm not inventing that. And so what does that mean? Well, I would invite you to think about what kind of job you want, going through all those factors that we just considered, right? What size firm, what kind of work are you doing? What kind of lawyers are you working with? What kind of clients are you working with? What does your office look like? Are you working downtown in a big city? Are you working in a smaller town in a rural practice? Are you working from home most of the time? Are you in office most of the time? All these types of questions you want to ask yourself and give as much granularity as you possibly can to what you think would be your perfect job. In terms of resources, you can look at what you've liked in the past. You can look at other lawyers and think about what you like about their jobs. You can look at job descriptions that are posted, and you might see that there are certain bullet points that jump out at you. Collect those. Those are really good clues as to what is going to be ideal for you. And then what you might also do here is just create your dream job. And I've got a podcast episode. It's episode number 42 called Create Your Dream Job. So think about what that looks like for you, and then you can go about creating it. So that has been step 2. That is setting your GPS. I've gone through a number of factors. I'll recap them really quickly. Reassess your values, reassess your long-term goals. Ask yourself what you have learned about yourself from the work that you've been doing. So that's the type of work and your ideal work environment. What are your natural strengths and weaknesses? What are your preferences? What skills set you apart? What do you want more of? What have you been doing that you may want to stop doing? And finally, how would you describe your perfect job? Now, the third step, the first step was make a decision. Second step was to set your GPS. And we are finally at mind your mindset. So I've got 4 suggestions here that I'm going to offer. And I recognize that we're getting really close to an hour. That's impressive. So good for you. I hope this is really resonating with you, that you are taking notes, if not physically, at least mentally, about how you would respond to these prompts. Mind Your Mindset is all about getting your thinking aligned with a successful job search. And I say this because I see a lot of lawyers struggle with this. And when your mindset is off, it can really hamper your ability to succeed in the next stage, right? The job searching stage. So I have 4 suggestions here. Number 1 is to find your gratitude for your current role. No matter how unpleasant you might find your current role, I invite you to dig deep and to list out all the things that you are grateful for, right? Even if all you can come up with is, at least I've learned what I don't want, or I've learned what kind of habits are going to get me into trouble, or I've learned that this type of law is not for me. This size firm, these clients, whatever it happens to be, are not a good fit. You really want to develop a sense of gratitude. You no doubt have heard that you do not want to go into a job interview and disparage your current employer or any past employer. It does not reflect well on you. We all know this. And as a coach, I hear people talk about their previous employers, and they don't need to filter it for me. I don't expect my clients to filter for me and sugarcoat things if they're truly unhappy. However, if it comes through in an interview, right? If you are blaming your job, if you really hate your environment and that kind of seeps through in terms of the energy that you bring to your interview, my guess is that you're not helping yourself, right? People can feed off energy. And so if you can truly find that place where you have gratitude for your current job, you will be able to, number 1, let go. You'll be able to move on with a sense of, this is something that I learned from. You can look back. You won't feel that resentment that you might feel. You will also present so much more authentically and optimistically, right? Because I think that's where people can really get stuck, especially if you're in a bit of a painful process. You've been applying to lots of places. It's not going very well. It's taking forever. I mean, these are things that people will say when they're going through the process. And so you want your mindset to be as positive as possible, because that's what's going to make you really attractive. That's what's going to make you a magnet for that next opportunity. So number one is you want to find gratitude in the way that you can for the role that you have and to genuinely feel that, right? We don't want to fake it. We just want to find what are the things you can be grateful for. Now, you'll also want to adopt a learner's mindset. I am going to prepare you mentally for the fact that when you go into a job search, chances are you will not be accepted in every role that you apply for. In other words, you will face rejection. And rejection can sting if we're not prepared for it, if we don't expect it as part of the process. So I would like to prepare you for rejection ahead of time so that when it happens, you're okay with it. So what that means is adopting a learner mindset. Be open to the idea that you're not going to be accepted or invited to every position that you apply for, that you may meet people who are not kind, that you might meet people who are not interested, etc. And there's a mantra that my mother taught me when I was young, back when I was a teenager, I think, looking for summer jobs. And summer jobs I found to be challenging to secure because it was harder to find employers who wanted a 2-month contract. A lot of the employers wanted people who were there for the long term. So she used to say to me, Paula, you only need one job, which I found helpful. But what she also said was persistent people begin their success where others end in failure. So you might have that as a mantra. Persistent people begin their success where others end in failure. So you're stepping in with a learner's mindset. You will learn from every interview. You will grow from every interview. You'll expand your network. You can meet lots of people, make lots of great impressions, and you're going to stay positive and keep going. And expect it that there will be challenges along the way, and that's okay. The fourth mindset shift that I'd invite you to make is to truly value yourself. Again, this may be more difficult if you are in a position where you have not been the one who chose to leave, that you've been asked to leave or you haven't been hired back. So I would love for you to build up your confidence. I would be more than happy to help you do that. Your value as a person, as a professional, is not determined by the outcome of a single job or articling experience. And when you can really see the value that you bring to a potential employer, you will approach informational interviews, networking, reaching out to other people, the interviews themselves. You will approach them from a place of feeling that sense of value, feeling that sense of contribution, which again, energetically can lead you in a much different direction relative to if you were to think of yourself as this person who needs a job, if you feel desperate, if you feel like you're imposing on people by reaching out to them. These are very different mindsets. And so what I would invite you to do is to value yourself, to see how you are a potential contributor to an organization, to demonstrate how you add value, because this will shift the way that you interact and engage with others and your willingness to reach out to others. And then finally, the fourth mindset shift that I would invite you to make is to take 100% responsibility for your job search. And so, yes, there are a certain number of job postings out there and you don't control the postings, but you do control whether you choose to apply to them or not. There is, you can't control whether somebody responds to your LinkedIn message, but you can control whether you send one and what you say within the message. So I would invite you to think about where you have 100% control and take responsibility for the process, right? We don't want to blame others or leave the search up to somebody else. Even if you're working with a coach, the responsibility remains yours to go and find the job, to do the interview, to demonstrate how you would be a valuable contribution to another organization. So we just want you taking that responsibility. That will give you more power. That will be empowering to you. You now get to feel more in control instead of depending on all these other external factors that are not within your control. So, well done. You have now finished this first masterclass in what will be a 3-part series. Just to recap, today we talked about how you're going to prepare for the job search. So as you can see, there's a lot there, right? We talked about making a decision, right? Whether you've made a decision, in which case you can just move ahead with the process, or if you are making a decision, that was the first thing we talked about. Number 2 was setting your GPS. So I went through a number of factors for you to consider to get to know yourself better and to really understand what it is that you are looking for. And then that third factor was the mindset, right? How would I encourage you to think about the process, right? This is where we talked about finding the gratitude for your current role, to take on that learner's mindset. We can expect that there's going to be some rejection in there, that it might take a while, and we're okay with that. We're accepting it ahead of time. We are putting on that mindset of valuing yourself, right? Really building up your sense of self-confidence, and you're taking 100% responsibility for the process. So that is what I have to share with you today. I just loved having you here with me today. I'm excited for you to come back next week, or if you're listening to this after the fact, you can just go straight to that next episode. That will be part 2. And that's where I'm going to take you through the process of getting the job, right? So this is the CVs, the cover letters, the interviews, finding the jobs, etc. So I hope you've loved this episode. I look forward to reconnecting with you again soon. And if you know someone who's going through a search, please share this episode with them. If you liked the episode, right? If you like any of these episodes, please give me a rating and review wherever it is that you download your podcasts. That would be amazing. I would love to receive your feedback, and it will help others just like you to find this podcast. So thanks again. And I look forward to being in touch with you again very soon. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. For instructions on how to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com/podcast launch. See you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.